What if the person holding you back was you? Not the version everyone sees, but the part you've buried, the thoughts you avoid, the emotions you silence, the truths you pretend aren't there. We repress what we fear. We deny what we can't control. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits. And in waiting, it begins to shape us quietly, relentlessly. This isn't a journey into light. It's a descent. Not into chaos, but into the psyche's hidden underworld, where the pieces of you you've tried to forget are still alive, still speaking. Carl Jung didn't believe in clean answers. He knew the mind wasn't simple, that the soul carries contradictions. He believed that wholeness is not found in perfection, but in embracing what's been cast away. Shadow work, in his view, isn't therapy, it's alchemy. The sacred process of turning repressed emotion into raw insight, unconscious pain into conscious power. It's not about becoming someone better. It's about remembering who you are when nothing is hidden. And so we begin. There is a part of you that you've never truly met. Not because it's far away, but because you've learned not to look. Carl Jung called it the shadow. It is everything we've disowned to be accepted. Every emotion we were told was too much. Every thought we were taught to silence. Every truth that didn't fit the roles we were forced to play. The shadow holds your anger, your fear, your envy, but it also holds your power, your forgotten creativity, your unclaimed strength. It isn't evil. It isn't wrong. It's just hidden. And what we hide doesn't die, it waits. In the depths of the unconscious, these repressed parts continue to live. They show up as projection when we judge in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. They show up as sabotage in habits we don't understand, in choices we keep repeating. We often believe we're being good by ignoring these impulses. But the truth is, avoiding the shadow only gives it more control. To see it is not to condemn it. To see it is to listen. To feel the heat of anger and ask what it's protecting. To notice envy and hear the longing beneath it. Understanding the shadow means daring to be radically honest with yourself. Not to shame the darkness, but to recognize its message. Because within the very traits you've been taught to hide is the blueprint of your healing. When you stop running from the shadow, you begin the quiet, powerful return to a self that's never truly left. The shadow does not live in isolation. It ripples through our choices, our relationships, our lineage. And Jung saw these ripples not as random chaos, but as karma. Not karma in the way we often hear it as punishment or fate, but karma as consequence. The psychic weight of what remains unresolved. Every unspoken truth, every unhealed wound, every disowned part leaves an imprint, and that imprint guides us until we learn to see it. We begin with personal karma, the loops you live inside, the habits that hurt you, though you don't know why, the patterns that keep pulling you backward, not because you choose them, but because something within you hasn't been seen. Then there's interpersonal karma, the echoes that live in your connections, how we recreate the same conflicts with different faces, how your shadow reaches out and dances with someone else's, not to destroy, but to be recognized. Ancestral karma is older. It lives in the blood. The emotional weight passed silently through generations. You carry stories that weren't told, but were felt. Griefs that weren't yours, but became yours anyway. Cultural karma is the mask society gives you, the roles you were told to play, the truths you had to bury to belong. This karma is woven through belief systems, norms, and silence. It teaches you who you're allowed to be and convinces you that's all you are. And finally, there is archetypal karma, the ancient stories that shape your inner world. The inner hero, the outcast, the wounded child. These are not just myths, they are mirrors. They call you into confrontation, not to break you, but to awaken something deeper. Shadow work invites you to see all these threads, to trace them gently, to question, what am I carrying that is not mine? What am I repeating because I haven't yet healed? This is not about blame. It's about awareness. Because when you recognize the pattern, you break its power. When you hold the weight, you begin to release it. And in doing so, you begin to remember you are not bound by the past. You are the one who sees it and chooses differently. Once you begin to recognize the threads of karma, the personal wounds, the ancestral echoes, the cultural illusions, the next step isn't to solve them, but to welcome them. You cannot transform what you still run from. You cannot integrate what you haven't yet named. To master shadow work, you must invite the darkness in, not as an enemy, but as a long-lost part of yourself. A part that's been exiled, not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't safe to be seen. This invitation is not passive. It's not a resignation to chaos. It's an act of radical clarity, a deep inner agreement to no longer turn away. It begins in quiet moments when a memory stings, when a pattern repeats, when a reaction flares up unexpectedly. Instead of suppressing, you pause. You notice. You observe your own resistance. You ask, what is this protecting? What is it asking me to see? Shadow work is not about forcing the truth into the light. It's about softening your gaze until the truth feels safe enough to emerge. This is the work of deliberate introspection, creating space for reflection at the end of each day, noticing the emotions that linger, tracing your reactions back to their roots, journaling, meditating, breathing into the parts of you that ache. It's about listening more than speaking, feeling more than fixing. To invite the shadow in is to create a sanctuary within where nothing is rejected and everything has a place. Where the raw, the messy, the unpolished parts of you are not only allowed, but deeply honored. Because only when the shadow feels seen can it begin to soften. Only when it is welcomed can it begin to speak. Once the shadow has been invited in, once you've created the space for it to speak, the next step is perhaps the most delicate and the most transformative. You must learn to listen, not with the ears of judgment, but with the eyes of inner truth. To acknowledge the shadow is to say, I see you. You've been here all along. I'm ready now. Integration is not a battle. It is a conversation, not a conquest, but a reunion. To integrate the shadow is to step into the labyrinth of the self, not to escape it, but to map it. To walk its winding corridors with presence, tracing the outlines of pain, fear, and forgotten light. Carl Jung offered a profound tool for this process: active imagination. Unlike daydreaming, this isn't an escape. It's entry into the world of inner symbols, hidden figures, and silent truths that live just beneath awareness. You close your eyes. You soften your breath. You let the unconscious speak in images, voices, colors, landscapes, and then you engage. You ask questions. You respond. You enter into dialogue with what you once rejected. Maybe a figure appears, a child, a beast, a stranger, maybe it frightens you. But if you stay and listen, you may realize it holds a message, a memory, a need, a part of you waiting to come home. This is not performance, it's presence. Every time you meet your shadow in imagination, you build a bridge between the conscious and the unconscious. And each crossing allows more of you to return. You begin to reclaim the pieces, the instincts, the intuition, the inner fire, not to be ruled by them, but to integrate them, to let them take their rightful place within a larger, wiser self. And in doing so, something subtle begins to shift. The parts of you that once felt scattered start to move toward wholeness. This is the quiet miracle of shadow work. Not becoming someone else, but finally fully becoming you. To journey deep into the shadow is to confront what you've spent years avoiding. Memories you buried, emotions you numbed, parts of yourself you learned to hate. Without compassion, this path can feel like self-destruction. Because when you unearth the wounded pieces, they don't need critique, they need care. Shadow work is brutal if done without kindness. You are not excavating darkness to punish yourself. You are doing it to understand, to hold space for your own pain, not with harshness, but with fierce, unwavering compassion. The kind that says, I will not abandon you even here. We're taught to be strong by suppressing. But true strength is gentler. It's the strength to stay with what hurts without needing to fix it right away. This is the turning point. When you stop treating the shadow as a threat and begin to treat it as something sacred. You are not broken. You are layered. You are textured with history, story, and soul. The parts of you that misbehave, that lash out, that grieve too long are not shameful. They are signals. They are younger versions of you, still asking to be held. Self-compassion in shadow work isn't indulgence. It's survival. It's the breath you take when the darkness feels too dense. It's the whisper, I'm here with you. I won't look away. Because in the end, the shadow isn't your enemy. It's the part of you still waiting not to be corrected, but to be loved. After compassion softens the inner terrain, a deeper form of work begins not through words or thoughts, but through symbols. The shadow doesn't speak the language of logic. It speaks in images, in dreams, in the subtle language of the soul. And so, to resolve the shadow, you must meet it on its own ground. This is where creative visualization becomes a sacred tool, not to escape reality, but to enter it more fully, to walk into the dreamscape of your inner world and engage what once felt unreachable. You close your eyes, you breathe, you descend, and in this imagined realm, a forest, a cave, and forgotten room figures appear. Sometimes strange, sometimes familiar, a wounded child, a wild animal, a masked stranger. These are not illusions. They are symbols, living expressions of the unconscious, each carrying a message, a memory, a mirror. You don't control them. You meet them. You listen. You respond. You allow the interaction to unfold. Conflict may arise, so may tenderness. And slowly through this symbolic exchange, you begin to understand not with your mind, but with your being. This is the path of inner alchemy, transforming psychic chaos into clarity. Visualizing dissolution, the breaking apart of what no longer serves. Purification, the release of old pain. And rebirth, the return of a self more whole, more true. You begin to see the shadow not as a stain, but as raw material, a sacred mess, a divine disruption waiting to be shaped. And in this process, healing stops being theoretical. It becomes experiential. You do not just know the truth. You live it through symbol, through image, through the silence, knowing that only the soul understands. After the visions fade, after the symbols speak, something in you stirs unfinished. The unconscious is still whispering, but not through words. Now it asks to move, to speak in form, in color, in breath, to rise through the body, not just the mind. Let it. Let the shadow express itself in the ways logic never could. Paint what you feel but can't explain. Dance the tension lodged in your bones. Write without rules. Scream into the wind. Let the act itself become the ritual. Creative expression is not performance, it is release. It is soul language, a direct transmission from the inner world to the outer one. And then, let go. Don't cling to what it's supposed to mean. Don't polish it, package it, or try to explain it away. Some truths are meant to be felt, not understood. This is where surrender begins. Surrender is not silence. It's allowing. Allowing the process to take you where it needs to. Trusting that not every shadow needs to be solved. Some only need to be seen. And some only need to be honored. There is healing in expression. But there is transformation in surrender. Because when you release control, you open the door for something deeper to emerge. Something older than ego. Something wiser than fear. Your psyche knows the way home. All it needs is your willingness to follow. We've been taught to analyze pain, to dissect it, label it, and file it away like data. But emotions are not data. They are energy, alive, moving, and most of us don't actually feel them. We explain them. We rationalize them. We escape them in clever, quiet ways. Shadow work reverses that. It invites you not to think about the feeling, but to feel it. To sit with the heat of anger, not to extinguish it, but to understand what it's defending. To let sadness wrap around you, not as a weight, but as a signal that something within you is ready to be held. To name the fear without shrinking from it. To breathe into the places that tremble. But this process has only one rule: no judgment, no suppression, just presence. Because emotions are not threats. They are messages. Coded letters from your unconscious, written in the only language it knows: sensation, tension, tightness, release. If you truly listen, you will begin to decode them. You'll see that anger isn't about rage. It's about a boundary violated long ago. Fear isn't weakness. It's the voice of the child who wasn't safe. The sadness isn't depression. It's the mourning of a self you weren't allowed to be. And in that moment of full, raw feeling, something opens. Because what we allow ourselves to feel, we allow ourselves to heal. And every emotion fully felt is a piece of the shadow softening, speaking, coming home. There is a place within you that doesn't speak, but sees everything. A quiet presence beyond the chatter of the mind, beyond the grip of emotion, beyond the judgment of ego. Jung called us to explore the depths, but even in the descent, we are never without guidance. This is where the silent witness comes in. It's not a role you perform, it's a space you remember. The part of you that simply observes without needing to fix, to explain, to react. You watch your thoughts rise and fall. You feel your emotions swell and fade. You see the old patterns reappear, and yet you do not become them. You just watch. This is the heart of mindfulness in shadow work. You do not dive into the darkness blindly. You carry a candle with you, and that candle is awareness. When you access the silent witness, you begin to see the difference between the storm and the sky that holds it. You realize you are not your thoughts. You are not your pain. You are the space in which they appear. And in that space, you are no longer trapped. You are free. Free to feel without drowning. Free to remember without collapsing. Free to heal without losing yourself. The silent witness is the stillness beneath your becoming, the calm that remains no matter how loud the shadow speaks. And in learning to rest there, you discover something extraordinary. That wholeness was never about fixing what's broken, but remembering the part of you that was never broken to begin with. Shadow work is not self-improvement. It is self-return. It's not about chasing light, but learning to see in the dark, to recognize the shape of your pain and the truth it's been holding all along. By turning inward, by meeting what we've feared, we reclaim the forgotten, the voice silenced in childhood, the fire dimmed by expectation, the truths buried beneath performance. In every shadow lies a part of you not evil, not flawed, just unseen. And when you bring it into awareness, not to fix it but to feel it, you begin to remember who you were before the world told you to hide. This is not a journey to perfection. It's a quiet unfolding into something deeper than identity, something older than pain. So remember, the shadow is not darkness to fear. It is the cave of your becoming, and in its stillness, your truest self has been waiting. If this stirred something in you, don't scroll past it. Comment, "I choose to face my shadow." Share this with someone still running from themselves, not to confront them, but to free them. And subscribe, not for content, but for the code that helps you come home to yourself.